As much as I dig the picture, how's everybody doing this morning? Good. I'm waking up. I love the free coffee here. It's amazing. My name's Kate Wakefield. I'm a local musician, and I'm really excited to chat with you all about just tell a little bit of my story in relationship to sound and in relationship to just sort of different struggles that I think we all go through, and how I came to recognize that and kind of work with that with what I do. Before I start talking, I don't usually talk, I usually play music, so this is going to be great for me. I think I'll just play 2 songs to just kind of introduce what I do, what I'm about. In case anyone's not familiar with a loop pedal, what I'm going to be doing is feeding my voice and my cello into a little box that basically allows me to do live recordings and live harmonies with myself. So if you have any questions after about how that works, or if you're curious about getting one yourself, I would love to help anybody out with advice on that, because it's a really pretty fun little device. So, all right. Is this on? There we go. All right. I like microphones. Cool. This first song, I decided to start with a little bit more of a chill song since it's still pretty early. This song is called Christmas Song. I wrote it probably a year or 2 years, 2 years ago. Oh my gosh, time flies. But I wrote it at a holiday time when I think the holidays are kind of hard for a lot of people. So anyway, here we go. Stars are made of thoughts that we threw into the sky, and our bodies are just pieces of the days we left behind, and the snow falls down. And the little gentle eyes look to the walls, and the days that we loved, they dissolve to pieces. And the snow falls down upon our empty souls. The secret is we are forgettable. The days, the lamps, the hours, all replaceable. The secret is we are erasable. The secret is we are forgettable. The days, the lamps, the hours, all replaceable. The words, the souls, the feet, all erasable. And the snow falls down upon our empty souls. It was all so lovely. When was it all so lovely? I knew your fingers then. I loved the tips of them. Thank you. And one more for you all before I chat about things and sound. The song is called Home. microphones. And speaking of microphones, I'm going to get
another one
mic'd again. Cool. Anybody have any good jokes about microphones or sound or mornings that are creative? I don't either. All right. Sweet. For sure. Thank you. Awesome. Alrighty. So, sound. Scrolling down because I have a cheat sheet, because that's life. All right. Firstly, I think everybody has a really complicated relationship with sound. We all make them. We make them every day, but I don't know about all of you, but when I was really young, I was taught to kind of hate it. I was taught to hate my own voice. I was taught from a very early age to cringe when I heard my voice on a recording. It was always like too loud, too soft. It was always inappropriate. It was always, I don't know, I hated my accent even. Like everything about my recorded voice, I loathed. I mean, who here really loves their speaking voice, you know? Like when you hear it, I bet some of you really aren't pleased. And I think that's pretty depressing, to be honest. Growing up, my sister was a singer, and I was kind of like the Jan Brady of the family, always like following in her footsteps. Anyway, I ended up actually going to school for opera singing, because like, I guess when you're Jan Brady, you practice really hard, and you're like, I'm gonna get it right. I'm gonna go to school for this. But anyway, I ended up going to school for opera, and even when I was in opera school, it was like the same struggles were there, you know? You're making sounds out in the open, you're taking lessons that should somehow change the sounds that are in you to make them better. For me, it became this game of how good I could get. Through school, it turned into kind of the opposite. It turned into how much of myself I could pick apart and how much of myself I could hate and then discard through really hard practice. Even in grad school at CCM, I remember really just disliking the sound of my voice on recordings. I would sing in a lot of operas and in so many classes, but even with all my progress, my voice sounded flabby and I could always find something wrong. I was terrified of hearing myself because I always wanted the sound to be better or different than it was. After graduation, I started to climb the professional opera ladder, which basically meant taking tons and tons of auditions in New York and being flown out to competitions, paying coaches to listen to my voice, rip it to shreds, and turn me into a better performer. I don't know quite what point it was the year after graduation. It might have been because I was working at a restaurant job and the restaurant was just really loud. It might have been the stress from the auditions, but at one point something happened that completely changed the course of my professional life and definitely my relationship with sound. I developed a really, really intense vocal disorder. I had this thing that doctors called muscular vocal fatigue that basically means you lose the power behind your vocal cords completely. The entire middle range of my voice sounded like a whisper, and I couldn't laugh. It would sound like ha, 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 and I couldn't cry. When I cried, it was like I would feel the tears on my face, but there'd be this raspy, gasping sound, kind of choking. And there's nothing more depressing than, at least for me, when you're really wanting to bawl your eyes out because you can't talk. And then the funny thing is you can't even cry either because ha, 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 it was horrible. But anyway, the doctor that I went to showed me a camera of my vocal cords. And in the camera, I could see the cords and how when I spoke, they refused to come together. And they were just incredibly inflamed. When I asked her if I would be able to sing again, up to even remotely the capacity that I had been prior to this,
she told me that she really didn't know. She wasn't sure. For the first few months of realizing this and living with this, it was pretty freaking terrible. My whole life had been devoted to being an opera singer, like practicing every day, saving up my money so I could afford these auditions. And I was doing really well, I was like, and so it just felt like everything was for nothing. I went to vocal therapy, and vocal therapy is really cool. They give you these little tiny exercises. She compared them to like doing a plank for your vocal cords. So they sound kind of like this. But anyway, you do all these like little tiny exercises, and they were supposed to strengthen my vocal cords. And the therapist was really cool, and she said something. She could tell I was getting really discouraged, and she said something that completely changed my life. She told me to work up to my temporary limitations. Like, work up to your temporary limitations. It's an incredibly freeing thought when you think about it in regards to life, but it was really freeing for me with music and with sound making. No one had ever told me this. No one had ever told me that you could work up to something temporary and that was okay. If you give yourself permission to work up to your temporary limitations, you're giving yourself permission to throw perfection out of the window. I could tell myself, yeah, this sounds pretty terrible, but this is temporary. This is a temporary state, and I'm going to enjoy working up to where I can. I started playing cello again. I hadn't done it in like years. I played when I was a kid. And with cello, as a kid, I always thought I was pretty mediocre at the instrument, and I really was. And I had this thought with cello too, where you either make it or you don't. You're either practicing to become a concert orchestra musician or whatever, or you're a failure and you're wasting your time. But when I couldn't sing, when I couldn't even make a sound, cello was really therapeutic. I started to make sounds, just like play an open note on the cello, and like I could just really listen to it and really enjoy it. And I started to listen to the notes differently, and they would like ring in the air, and they weren't perfect at all. Like my tone was not perfect, but it was just like so beautiful. I could feel the sounds physically, like they would physically change my states, and I could hear that they weren't the best. I wasn't a concert cellist, but it really began to matter less and less. I gave myself permission to take up space, audible space. I gave myself permission to start coming up with melodies on my cello, and I began writing tons and tons of songs and just recording them all on my phone. And some were really sing-songy, some were dark, some were strange, some were really cliche. But I gave myself permission to write them. And I think half of the battle with sound and with many things in life is just giving yourself permission to commit to whatever it is you're trying. Saying to yourself that the idea of perfection and what is valid is truly a cruel myth that ends up holding you back rather than propelling you forward. I used to be motivated by that myth and the idea of making perfect sounds. And now I'm motivated by the idea of creative freedom and creating and listening without judgment. Through steady work with my therapy, all the vocal therapy, my voice gradually started to come back. I started writing songs for cello and voice, and at first it was really hard, and I would record what I was working on, hear my voice, and just like kind of crumble in upon myself, And I would be filled with this like sinking feeling of never having back what I had worked so hard to have. But, you can't like live with that you can't live in that low state, So like, just had to refocus my lens. And one of the things that helped the most with voice was actually focusing on the idea of communication. Like sounds can be about perfection, And they can be about what is good and what is bad, but they can also be about raw and open communication. I started writing poetry and I would speak it out loud in my room. I would read other people's poetry just by myself, and I started to just really enjoy the words, and not be thinking so much about what it sounded like, but just feel the words as they were forming in my mouth and feel what they meant. I was focusing on what I was communicating. And it was interesting because as I was doing that, I realized that the imperfect sounds that I was making could actually resonate with other people through the very fact that they were imperfect. And none of us are perfect people, and we don't make perfect sounds. And many of us hate our bodies, our voices, our faces, our jobs, and we think we're bad family members and that we don't measure up to the perfection all around us, that we don't deserve to be here. But we all do have the right to be here and to make sounds. And if you want to, you should give yourself permission to create any sound that you would like, even if it's ugly, even if it's weird, even if you secretly think it's beautiful, but you're oh, everyone else is gonna think it's ugly, those sounds too. An exercise that I think maybe you should all try if you're feeling like it at some point would be to record yourself on your cell phone every day. We all have those voice recorders, and if you don't, then you have a flip phone, and then good for you, that's awesome. Keep the flip phones going. But if you have a voice recorder, press record, be in your car or in your room or anywhere that you know that you're not going to be overheard, and just kind of talk, just talk about anything. Talk about something you hate, something you love, something that pissed you off that day. But just talk, and then later, force yourself to listen. Because I guarantee, at first, when you do this every day, because I've done this every day, I record myself like I said, it was a process. But the more you record yourself, the more you listen to yourself and your voice, you start realizing that it's actually it's just a voice. It's uniquely and solely yours, and you don't have to hate it so much. And then another thing that I kind of do a lot that frees me up is to practice making sounds on paper, quiet sounds, because sounds are oftentimes quiet before they're loud. So maybe you just write 5 minutes a day, and just even if you're not a writer, even if you don't consider yourself to be creative in that way, take a different word. Like I said about, love or hate, or it could be pine cone. How do I feel about pine cones? And just write for a minute, time it out, just whatever, without judgment. Just do it. And then maybe even say them out loud, maybe read what you wrote. But just to try to get out of the mode of judging immediately. Speaking of judging, I think when you listen to your own voice, this all kind of extends out past yourself as well. We live in a time where I think it's really easy for people to make snap judgments on everyone around them. And I know when I was studying opera, I was really quick to judge people and to judge sounds and songs. I would hear something and I'd immediately classify it as oh, they're hitting that note, or oh, this is good, this is bad, this is a waste of sound waves. Really kind of cruel stuff would just go through my head. But when you start judging your voice less and yourself less in that way, you can do the same for the people around you. And now when I listen to songs, those words rarely come up. The negative rarely comes up. When I'm listening now, maybe something's not my favorite thing ever, but I try to hear what's being communicated. And sometimes I love a voice even more if it's different and something I'm not used to than a perfectly beautiful voice that's saying nothing and that has no passion or meaning behind it. So, yeah, I mean, basically, I encourage everybody to just try to embrace the sounds that you make on a daily basis and embrace the sounds of those around you, you know? So that's my little spiel. Yeah. And does anyone have a phone on them? Well, because I was thinking I should have said this on the memo for the event or whatever, but if anyone's interested, we could do the little 5-minute, the writing exercise, but on your phone. We could all just sit and do it for maybe we could do 3 words together. And you don't have to say any of your words out loud. But yeah, if you don't want to do this, text people, surf Facebook, drink your coffee in peace. But if you do want to do this, I'm going to get my phone out too. And we can just take 3 minutes and just write some free thoughts together. So, does anyone have a good word for the first minute? What? Pine cone. Oh, that's perfect. Okay, I mean, seriously. Well, and with this, maybe you'll think pine cone, and then all of a sudden you'll think of, maybe it'll turn into a whole different rant. It'll turn into something about, just write whatever you want for a minute. So here we go. Does everybody have their note thing out? Who wants to have their note thing out? Okay. What? That's great. Oh, I wish I had paper.
We have paper and Sharpies.
There's paper and Sharpies in the back if anybody wants to paper and Sharpie it old school wise. So, all right, cool. I'm going to set the alarm for a minute, and then we're going to do this. The timer was at 30 minutes. That would be horrible. We're all just writing about pine cones for 30 minutes. Yeah. Anybody else need paper? I do need paper. I would like to use a paper instead of. Thank you. Perfect. All right. Pine cones. Ready? Go. All right, cool. Next word, sound. Ready? 1, 2, 3, go. Let's do one more. Does anyone have a random word that they think it would be fun to propel them forward?
Polar vortex.
Polar vortex? Yes. All right. Polar vortex. Go. Did anyone have any good things for polar vortex? Yeah, anyway, I don't know. But yeah, so and then with these words that you just wrote, some of you probably thought that was maybe boring or weird. Some of you might have thought it was like freeing, but you should totally go to your car and just read about pine cones and read about the stuff that you wrote down, just because. I mean, why not, Why not? How are we doing on time? All right, I think I'm gonna open this up for Q&A if anyone has questions that could be answered. If not, I'll write a song about pine cones, but.
When you were solely opera, was it more traditional opera? Because at least the two songs you played have a certain darkness to them, which is spellbinding, I think. But
Thanks.
was there a transition into that sort of sound, or was that sort of always in you, and releasing the imperfection portion sort of freed you to do what was already there?
Yeah. When I studied opera, it was all like, ooh, like garbly, fun and pretty and stuff, but definitely traditional opera. And you're totally right. Like when I focused more on the words, and when I was just focused on the words versus like the sound production, I had a lot of training, so that definitely helped. I'm not saying it was just like I miraculously could sing this style of music, but yeah, it definitely came from experimenting and writing different songs.
Did you already like poetry before the voice thing?
Oh, I loved poetry. My first year in grad school here, I would just go home at 10:30 at night after rehearsals and just read T.S. Eliot and Bukowski out loud to myself and drink some whiskey and then get ready for the next day. But yeah.
Can you kind of describe what happened when you found the pedal?
Oh, yeah. When I found the pedal, it was actually a present from one of my best friends. And it was fun because it was you can all of a sudden do so many harmonies and you can play with it in different ways. It's a whole nother instrument. And I used to, when I was a kid, I would write songs on acoustic guitar. But with a pedal, it's a whole nother thing to learn, and it kind of also makes you think differently about music, or at least did for me.
Do you ever harmonize with another person, or do you prefer to do yourself?
When I was in school, when I was in school and operas and things, I would harmonize with other people. And I have a band called Lung. It's like a punk electric cello project, and I'm trying to get my bandmate to sing while he plays the drums. So hopefully, if he's up for singing, then hopefully I'll get to do some harmonies there.
Tell us how a punk electric cello band works.
So, yeah. Basically, it's I had a bad November last year, and I started writing all these kind of angsty songs that sounded like the Cranberries or something. And I was like, I can't do this on my solo project. This isn't gonna work in between pretty songs and have. Anyway, so then it's just I'm just using my cello like you would a bass guitar or an electric guitar. And for that, I use an electric cello and I plug it into a bass pedal and a distortion pedal and then the bass amp. So it's just really loud and there's drums and then I sing. So it's just a lot more head banging, basically. That's the big difference there.
You spoke a lot about hearing your own voice and what it's like to hear your own voice. Was there a moment whenever you started experimenting with the pedal that there was kind of like a realization on your own part that you were now playing with this thing that you hated in the past?
Yeah, well, I think it was like the most glaringly like horrible when I was, because like the disorder thing, it would be like the first thing I would think about every morning when I woke up for like a very long time. It's only like within the last year that's like the first thought that I would have in the morning would be, I wonder if I'll be able to talk normally today, because it would fluctuate. And so then with the pedal, it was like you could hear all those imperfections right back. And then, but then I was starting to do shows and I was starting to write, and so it was like I just had to kind of accept that some days it wasn't going to be up to what I wanted it to be, but that was okay, and I had to like that. Cool.
When you write songs, do you think about harmonizing with yourself then, or like when you write something, how does that whole process take place?
Like,
Do you add that as an afterthought, or are you planning that ahead of time? If you know you're going to be harmonizing certain parts.
I mean, usually it's like, if I wanted to write something, I'll just write so I'll do like a bass thing, like. Maybe sing something. Pine cones, yeah. I saw a pine cone the other day. It was under my foot and it was totally overrated. But yeah, with the pedal, like it's like a different, like if you have one and you use it and you practice with it, harmonies it's like you're practicing harmony. And anything you practice, you're going to get better at, like, doesn't matter what point you're starting at. So the more work I've done with this pedal in the past 2 years, it's been since 2014, I can just hear harmonies so much quicker than I could when I first got it. So now it's just kind of like, I'll sing something, I'll make a harmony, and then I'll play around with it. I'll always, as far as songwriting goes, like if anyone wants to write songs and doesn't, one thing that helped me when I was just writing them is always record everything. Always, just turn on your recorder. You might have a really great idea and forget it later. And then with the pedal, I'll just come up with like a loop like that, which I kind of like. I wish I'd been, anyway. But like you come up with like, oh yeah, there's a camera. Yeah, so you'll just come up with something on your pedal and then kind of have it play out, and then you can improvise on top of it, maybe enjoy some tea or like a burrito while you're doing it, and then have it. I just have burritos hanging around my house, Just kidding. But yeah, pedals, harmonies, do it. Cool. All right, I think we're good. Thank you so much to Creative Mornings and to Scott. I actually recorded the punk album, it's like a demo back there, in this very space. So if anyone's thinking of recording, I can vouch. This space is amazing to record in. So anyway, have great days.